I never imagined my own sister would ask me to trade my dreams for her Instagram fairy tale. But then again, Chloe Clark was always good at turning the ridiculous into the expected. I'm Madison Clark. I'm 29, a freelance tax consultant. At least that's what everyone thinks. The truth is, that's just my daytime cover. By night and most weekends, I run Clark & Cedar Events, a boutique investment firm that renovates historic properties and flips them into high-end event venues. My company is registered under an LLC with no trace to my name. Discretion is part of the business. Not even my parents know what I do. My life's work began with an old craftsman house on the edge of Portland's historic district. Faded paint, cracked windows, and a porch that creaked like a haunted movie set. But it had charm. It had soul. It had possibility. I bought it 3 years ago. Every dime of the down payment scraped together from years of waitressing, tutoring, and moonlighting as a freelance bookkeeper for tech startups. It was mine. Every floorboard, every chipped tile. I didn't need much, just peace, privacy, and control over my life. Something I never had growing up in the Clark household. My sister Chloe, on the other hand, has always craved the opposite. Spotlight, applause, approval. And she always got it. She's 3 years younger, but you'd think she was the eldest by the way my parents orbited around her. Sharon and Greg Clark, the soft suburban idealists, raised Chloe like she was the center of a very curated solar system. New car at 16, study abroad in Paris, a gap year that turned into 2 because she was finding herself. While she jetted off to Bali with a new boyfriend, I was stuffing envelopes for a tax firm and skipping meals to pay off my student loans. But of course, none of that matters now, not since Chloe got engaged to Cameron Whitmore. Yes, that Whitmore. Son of Martin and Lydia Whitmore, old money from Northern California. Venture capital royalty. The kind of family that throws charity galas for things like swan rehabilitation and has private chefs who do wine pairings for breakfast. Chloe met him at a fashion tech launch party. She was consulting on branding, whatever that means. 3 months later, she was flashing a 5-carat oval-cut diamond and reposting Vogue Weddings mood boards. Suddenly, every conversation in our family was about floral installations, monogrammed wax seals, and whether rose gold or champagne looked better on table linens. I smiled politely. I stayed quiet, but I should have known something was coming. It happened over dinner, a Saturday night. Saturday. My parents invited us all over. Me, Chloe, Cameron, and apparently Brittany, her high-strung wedding planner, who looked like she'd snorted 5 shots of espresso and swallowed Pinterest whole. Mom made her famous spinach lasagna. Dad opened a bottle of mid-tier red, which meant we were celebrating something. I braced myself. "So," Chloe said sweetly, batting her lashes in a way that should have set off sirens, "I've found the venue." I looked up from my plate. "Oh?" "It's called Rose Hill Estate," she breathed, like she was naming a sacred temple. "It's beyond perfect. Vintage gardens, marble ballroom, chandeliers imported from Venice." "That sounds impressive," I said carefully. She nodded. "It's $100,000 for the venue alone." I paused. "Sorry, did you say 100,000? She repeated, emphasizing each syllable like I was slow. "But it's worth it. This is the Whitmore wedding, Madison. It has to be iconic." Silence fell. I assumed she'd move on, talk about flower walls or signature cocktails. But then she looked at me, eyes gleaming. "That's why," she said slowly, "I need you to sell your house." I actually choked, like physically, mid-sip of wine. I coughed, blinked, and waited for her to laugh. She didn't. "You want me to—" "What?" "Sell your house," she repeated, as if explaining basic math. "You can rent somewhere smaller for a while. It's not like you need all that space. And that old thing needs so much work anyway. And this way," she added with a proud smile, "you can contribute to my perfect day. Cameron's family is being very generous, and frankly, it's kind of embarrassing that our side hasn't stepped up." I looked at our parents. Surely they'd intervene. But no. My mother nodded, chewing her lasagna like it was gospel. "Honey, Chloe has a point," she said gently. "You're still single, and that house is a lot for one person. My father avoided my gaze. Classic. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, putting down my fork. "It's just a suggestion," Chloe said, shrugging. "But as my sister, my maid of honor, I really thought you'd step up." I took a slow breath. "I'm happy to help with the wedding, but I'm not selling my house." Her face twisted. "You're being selfish." I stood up. "And you're being entitled." Chloe slammed her glass down. "God, you've always been jealous of me because I'm happy, because I have a man, because I don't live in a dump." "Enough," I said, grabbing my coat. "Find yourself another maid of honor." I heard her dramatic sobs as I walked out the door, my mom calling after me, my dad's footsteps following. "Madison," he said outside, using the tone reserved for guilt-tripping, "think about what this wedding means. For the family, for Chloe." "For you, you mean," I snapped. "So you can impress the Whitmores and brag to your friends." He looked pained. "We just want to keep the peace." "There is no peace," I said. "Not when I'm expected to burn my life down to light hers up." He fell silent. I opened my car door, about to drive away. Then I paused. "Don't worry about the venue, Dad," I said, my voice calm. "I'll take care of it." He smiled, relieved. Probably thought I was finally coming around. He had no idea what I meant. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that 3 months ago, I had purchased a historic estate just outside the city, a faded rose brick mansion with oak-lined driveways and a ballroom that still echoed with 1920s jazz. I bought it through Clark and Cedar Events, renovated it in secret, registered the LLC under my middle name. Its name? Rose Hill Estate. And what was coming next would be the most satisfying event we'd ever hosted. The following morning, I woke up to 13 missed calls, 7 voicemails, and a string of texts from Chloe that could have fueled a whole season of a reality TV show. Caps lock, crying emojis, passive-aggressive memes. She even sent one of those "you ruined my life" TikToks. I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, at least not entirely, but because I was already knee-deep in drywall dust and renovation quotes. Rose Hill was still a work in progress, but it was mine. My masterpiece. Built in 1894, the estate had sat neglected for nearly a decade. Too expensive for casual buyers, too historic for developers. But I saw something in it. The ivy-covered arches, the hand-carved banisters, the ballroom ceiling that still bore the hand-painted constellations of the original architect's wife's favorite stars. It wasn't just a venue. It was a story waiting to be retold. I'd bought it under my LLC, Clark and Cedar Events, named after the street where my childhood dreams began and the tree outside my bedroom window that had once been my only witness. Nobody in my family knew the company was mine. They all assumed I was just some mid-level freelancer still figuring things out. I let them believe it. It was easier that way. And honestly, it was kind of satisfying watching them underestimate me. I spent weekends in steel-toed boots and a ponytail, working alongside the renovation crews. I negotiated with vintage lighting specialists, hand-picked marble tiles, and even learned enough plumbing to impress the city inspector. But while I was busy rebuilding something real, Chloe was busy constructing a delusion. And like all good delusions, it required a scapegoat when things didn't go her way. That scapegoat was me. The texts started subtle. "Madison, I know last night was intense, but I really think we can make this work. Can we talk?" Then came the emotional manipulation. "You always say you care about family, but when it counts, you disappear." And finally, the threats. "If you're not going to help, don't bother showing up at the wedding at all. I mean it." Sharon, our mother, didn't help. She called me daily with gentle suggestions that slowly morphed into polished guilt trips. "Sweetheart, it's just money," she'd say, as if my home was some seasonal handbag. "This wedding could mean so much to Chloe's future." Translation: this wedding could mean access to the Whitmore money train. Dad stayed quiet, as always. He'd become an expert at hiding behind his Kindle whenever conflict arose. But I didn't bite. I kept my head down and my plans tighter than ever. Kendra, my assistant, was the only one who knew the full story. She was sharp, efficient, and bless her, had the poker face of a CIA agent. She'd been handling most of the external communication for Clark and Cedar and had been the one to field the original inquiry from Chloe's wedding planner, Brittany. "I don't think she knows it's your venue," Kendra told me one morning, sipping her iced latte with a grin. Her email tone screams, "entitled influencer," but there's no clue she's connecting any dots. "Good," I said, tapping through the renderings for the main ballroom. "Let's keep it that way." "She's pushing for a Saturday in peak season," Kendra added, tossing around numbers like she's at an auction house. "Lock her in at full rate," I replied. "No discounts." "You want her to sign the contract?" "Oh, absolutely. Make sure Clause 12 is bolded." Clause 12. The venue retains the right to cancel any booking in the event of harassment, abuse, or hostile behavior directed toward staff or management, at our sole discretion. I wasn't just preparing a venue. I was preparing for war, with velvet gloves and catered snacks, of course. Flashbacks hit me harder than I expected. Like the time Chloe crashed my graduation dinner because she had a bad day and needed attention. Or when she borrowed my car without asking and racked up parking tickets I ended up paying. Or when I got my first tax client and my parents called it cute while praising Chloe's latest internship, which she quit 2 weeks later. It had always been the same. I worked. She coasted. I sacrificed. She demanded. But this time, I had leverage. And it wasn't just financial. It was symbolic. Rosehill wasn't just another business asset. It was the culmination of years of being overlooked, dismissed, and quietly underestimated. And now, Chloe wanted to waltz in and turn it into a backdrop for her performative Pinterest wedding? Not on my watch. Still, I kept things professional. Kendra handled everything: the tours, the booking agreements, the customizations. I gave my final approvals from the shadows. Brittany emailed a 15-page mood board titled Whimsical Opulence. It had mood lighting, pedal cannons, and a live harpist who doubled as a DJ. "Should we cancel the booking now or wait for maximum emotional damage?" Kendra joked. "We wait," I said. "Do you feel guilty?" "No," I replied, then paused. "Okay, maybe a little, but it's not like I'm setting her up. She picked my venue. She chose it." "You're just the plot twist," Kendra grinned. "Exactly. The funny thing is, the closer we got to the tour date, the more absurd the charade became. Chloe had no idea that the woman she kept badgering for wedding favors was her own sister. No idea that the venue she was about to boast about on social media was built with the very hands she tried to humiliate. I was preparing a presentation folder, photos, invoices, blueprints. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted receipts. Literal ones. I also had the screenshots. Every nasty text, every fake apology, every passive-aggressive jab masked as concern. I printed them all, put them in a clean leather folder marked Client History. Not to use them, unless I had to. But just like Chloe always taught me, it's better to be dramatic than unprepared. As the tour day approached, I began double-checking everything. Rosehill had to be perfect. Not just polished, but flawless. The marble floors were buffed until they glowed, the chandeliers rewired, the rose garden trimmed to photographic symmetry. The staff was prepped, every one of them briefed, including our groundskeeper Raoul, who didn't speak much English, but knew enough to smirk when I mentioned Bridezilla incoming. And then, it was the night before the tour. I stood alone in the ballroom, the moonlight pooling across the tiles. This room, this entire place, had once been crumbling, forgotten, just like I'd once felt. Now it was restored, glorious, and mine. Tomorrow, Chloe would walk through those front doors thinking she was on top of the world. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their jaws were about to hit that perfectly waxed floor. And I'd be waiting at the top of the grand staircase. The morning of the tour arrived with the sky so perfectly clear it could have been photoshopped. It was the kind of day brides pray for, sunlight pouring like champagne, a soft breeze playing with the trees, and not a single cloud in sight. If I believed in signs, I'd have called it poetic. At 6 o'clock a.m., I was already at Rosehill. My usual jeans and boots were replaced by a navy blazer, white blouse, black slacks, and nude heels. The official boss mode look. My name tag read Madison Clark, owner and CEO. It felt surreal wearing it, knowing that in a few short hours, I'd be revealing everything I had kept hidden for so long. I walked the grounds one final time. The gardens were flawless, every petal precisely trimmed. The crystal chandeliers inside the ballroom caught the sun like prisms, casting dancing lights across the marble. The place didn't just look beautiful, it glowed with power. By 8:30 a.m., Kendra arrived with our staff. Calm, composed, and wearing an all-black ensemble that screamed luxury event coordinator. She gave me a quick nod before heading to the lobby. "You good?" she asked under her breath. I nodded. "You?" "Born ready." We reviewed our plan one more time. She would handle the family's arrival, the introductions, and the initial walkthrough. I'd stay in the estate's private office, watching everything from the security feed until it was time to make my entrance. It wasn't just a dramatic flourish, it was strategy. Timing was everything. At exactly 9:05 a.m., the sleek black SUV rolled through the wrought iron gates, followed by a pearl-white Escalade. Chloe had arrived, fashionably early, of course. Even through the cameras, I could tell she was vibrating with excitement, probably imagining the behind-the-scenes shots she'd post later, with captions like, "Dreams do come true, #blessed, #Whitmore wedding." She stepped out in a cream power suit, sunglasses larger than her face, and heels that looked like they'd never touched real pavement. Cameron trailed behind her, wearing his usual practiced smile, the kind of expression people learn after years of private school discipline and country club politics. Behind them came my parents. Sharon in a floral blouse and beige slacks, clutching her handbag like a security blanket. Greg in his usual blue polo and dad jeans combo, looking uncomfortable before even walking in. Cameron's parents followed in a third car, Lydia and Martin Whitmore. If wealth had a uniform, they were wearing it. Tailored suits, subtle designer labels, and a chill in their demeanor that made the air feel a few degrees colder. Kendra greeted them with warm professionalism. "Welcome to Rose Hill Estate," she beamed. "We're honored to host your visit today. Let me give you a private tour." Chloe's eyes sparkled. "This place is even better in person," she squealed. "Cameron, look at those arches. Oh my God. And that chandelier. Dead." I watched from my screen as they glided through the entrance hall. Kendra guided them past the drawing room, library, and veranda, layering in details about the estate's history and recent renovations. "This estate was built in 1894 and retains most of its original craftsmanship," she explained. "Our team worked closely with local preservationists to ensure every detail met historic standards." Chloe nodded eagerly, already picturing her Pinterest boards coming to life. Cameron's mother paused by the garden windows. "It's tasteful, understated, old money vibes. I like it." Chloe beamed like a kid getting approval from the headmistress. "I'll need drone shots over the fountain," she said to Brittany, who was furiously typing notes on an iPad. Meanwhile, I was in the office upstairs, heart steady, expression calm. Then Kendra's voice came over the comm. "We're heading to the ballroom. Ready?" I looked at my reflection in the mirror one last time, fixed my collar, adjusted the tag, smoothed my expression into one of composed authority. "Showtime," I whispered. As the doors to the ballroom opened, I stood at the top of the grand staircase. Every chandelier glimmered. The marble beneath me shined like glass. Kendra led the group into the room and gestured up. "And now allow me to introduce the owner of Rose Hill Estate. She personally oversees every premium booking." All eyes turned upward. I began my descent, each step echoing softly through the vast room. Chloe's face morphed in real time, from confusion to recognition to sheer horror. "Madison?" she squeaked. What are you doing here?" I gave her the same calm, collected smile I'd rehearsed. "Welcome to Rose Hill Estate," I said smoothly, shaking hands with Cameron's parents first. "I'm Madison Clark, owner and CEO of Clark and Cedar Events." The silence was almost satisfying, delicious even. Lydia Whitmore blinked. "You own this place?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. 5 years of investment, renovation, and a whole lot of sleepless nights. It's been a journey." Chloe looked like someone had slapped her with a bouquet of reality. "But you live in that little craftsman house. You do taxes." I turned to her. "A good businesswoman knows the value of living below her means." She gawked. "You lied." "No," I replied coolly. "I just didn't correct your assumptions." Cameron's father spoke next. "So you've built all this yourself?" "Yes," I nodded, "with a team I trust." Lydia gave me a new look, one I'd never seen from her before. Respect. But Chloe wasn't done. "You can't just say no to our booking. Everyone knows we're getting married here. I already told my followers. I've announced it. I sent out save the dates." "I'm afraid," I said gently, "that your behavior violates our contract." I handed her a leather folder. Inside were copies of every abusive text, manipulative email, and emotional threat she'd sent over the past few weeks. Kendra had dated and filed them like a legal assistant preparing for court. In accordance with Clause 12, we reserve the right to decline bookings where clients create a hostile environment for staff or management. This applies. Her mouth opened and closed like a drowning fish. "I'm sure your wedding will be lovely elsewhere," I added, "but it won't be at Rose Hill." Cameron looked at Chloe, then at me, then at his parents. Silence. And then, unexpectedly, Lydia spoke. "I must say, Madison, I admire your poise. Your business is exceptional." "Agreed," Martin said. "Rare to see someone so young with this level of discretion and strategy." Chloe let out a soft whimper. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said. "You did that. I just stopped cleaning up after you." Greg tried to step in. "Mads, can't we talk about this?" I shook my head. "Not today." Kendra guided the group back to the lobby. My parents lingered awkwardly. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, her perfect image cracking. As they left, Cameron glanced back at me. "You know, part of me wishes you were the one I met first." I didn't respond, just smiled and turned away. The doors shut behind them with a satisfying click. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character. I was the architect of the scene, and the story was finally mine. Silence hung in the ballroom long after the doors closed behind Chloe and the others. I stood there for a moment, grounded, composed, but buzzing inside. Not from victory, but from release. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed had funneled into that one moment. And I hadn't needed to scream. I hadn't needed to slam any doors. I had simply told the truth and let the facts speak for themselves. But I knew that silence wouldn't last, not with Chloe. Especially not with Chloe. The storm came just under an hour later. My phone lit up in waves. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. The first was from my mother. "Sharon Clark. What you did was cruel. Your sister is devastated. We need to talk." Then Chloe, of course. Chloe Clark. "You evil bot. I hope you choke on your stupid ballroom floors." Then, bizarrely, a meme of a crying bride with the caption, "Family, the ultimate betrayal." Probably something she Googled mid-breakdown. Kendra poked her head into the office where I'd retreated after the reveal. She had 2 almond lattes in hand and a look that was equal parts concern and admiration. "You holding up?" she asked, offering me one. I took the cup and nodded. "She's going to go nuclear." "She already has." Brittany posted something vague about unexpected venue issues on her stories. Comments are flooding in. It's a circus. I sighed and sipped. "Good thing the NDA in our contract is ironclad." "Good thing you have a backbone made of titanium," she replied. The rest of the day passed in a strange sort of calm. The storm was raging online, but inside Rose Hill, everything was still. Beautiful. Steady. That night I went home to my craftsman and sat on the porch with a blanket and a glass of wine. The same house they'd called too small, too much work, just temporary. It had never been temporary. It had always been my foundation. I was mid-sip when a car pulled up. Headlights off. I recognized it instantly. Greg's Toyota. He walked up the steps like a man carrying bricks on his shoulders. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly. I didn't respond, just gestured to the second chair. He sat down with a groan, hands clasped. He didn't look at me at first. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About the company, the estate, any of it." "I know. I should have asked. Should have paid more attention." I nodded. "Yep," he exhaled. "You did good today. Not just with the property, with how you handled all of it. That surprised me. You're not here to beg me to reconsider?" "No," he said. "I'm here because I owe you an apology." I turned to face him. That was new. "You and your mother, we've made it easy for Chloe to get away with everything," he continued. "We kept telling ourselves she was just emotional or still growing up. But she's not a kid anymore, and what we asked of you, that wasn't fair, not even close." I stared at the dark street for a long moment. "You just watched it happen," I said. "Again and again. Every time she needed something, I was the solution, and you never said no." He swallowed hard. "I know. I was always the backup plan." "Not anymore," he said quietly. A part of me softened, just a little. We sat there for a while, neither of us saying much, just letting the silence do what words couldn't. The next day, Chloe officially canceled the wedding at Rosehill. Not that she had a choice. Her booking was declined and her deposit refunded. But the news wasn't shared with the same Instagram energy as the engagement. Instead, a single melancholic post appeared on her page. "Sometimes life doesn't go as planned. Starting a new chapter. #reset, #self-discovery." The comments ranged from confused fans to concerned friends to nosy high school acquaintances. I didn't respond. Word spread quickly that the Whitmore wedding was undergoing changes, and while Brittany scrambled to secure a new venue, her options were limited, especially in peak season. Eventually, she managed to book a resort 2 hours outside the city, less elegant, more rustic, and ironically, even more expensive. Chloe wasn't thrilled, but she didn't have the energy to fight anymore. According to a friend of a friend, thanks Kendra's Instagram sleuthing, Cameron's parents weren't pleased either. Martin Whitmore, who'd praised my business during the tour, had reportedly told Cameron, "You need to think long-term. Stability matters more than spectacle." That stung Chloe. What stung more was that she couldn't spin the story in her favor. Not really. Everyone who'd been there that day saw the truth, the way she cracked, the way she lashed out, and the way I didn't. My parents started acting different. Sharon sent flowers to my office, unnecessary but better than silence. Greg emailed me an article about top women entrepreneurs under 30 with a note. "This should have been you." It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. Business at Clark and Cedar began booming. Clients wanted the place that turned down the Whitmore wedding. We started receiving inquiries from out-of-state planners. Kendra and I began discussing expansion. It was surreal. One afternoon, a week after the confrontation, I received an envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Ms. Clark, thank you for the professionalism and grace you displayed during our recent visit. While the outcome was unexpected, my husband and I were deeply impressed by your poise and business acumen. Should you ever wish to expand into Northern California, we would be happy to connect you with our network. Warm regards, Lydia Whitmore." I stared at the card for a long time. Chloe had been chasing their approval, desperate to impress, and somehow, without trying, I had earned it by simply standing my ground. I didn't frame the card. That wasn't my style. But I tucked it into my desk drawer, beside the lease for Rosehill, my business license, and the first check I ever deposited from my freelance days. Meanwhile, Chloe stayed silent. No more texts, no calls, just digital breadcrumbs of a breakdown. She'd started posting about healing and reconnecting with her inner truth. Apparently, she was doing yoga teacher training in Sedona and selling handmade crystal bracelets on Etsy. Her wedding photos never surfaced. I wasn't bitter, truly, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's validation. Not my parents, not Chloe's, not society's. I had something better: peace, purpose, and power, and no one could take that from me again. It's been 11 months since the day I walked down the grand staircase at Rose Hill and turned my sister's fairy tale into a reality check. 11 months since I chose boundaries over obligation, since I chose myself. And in those 11 months, I've built something extraordinary. Rose Hill Estate is now the most requested wedding venue in 3 states. We're booked solid for the next 15 months, and we just broke ground on a second location in Napa. Clark and Cedar Events went from a passion project to a brand, a legacy in the making. Clients don't just come to us for a venue, they come for the experience, for the story, for the quiet elegance we've made our signature. And yet through it all, I still live in my little craftsman house. I've finally finished the renovations, this time with the help of a professional team, not just YouTube tutorials and caffeine-fueled all-nighters. The floors no longer creak, the kitchen gleams, and the garden, it blooms like I imagined it would the first day I stood at the overgrown gate with keys in hand. It's not the biggest house on the block or the newest, but it's mine, every inch of it. Sometimes when the sun hits just right through the stained glass in the entryway, I sit on the porch with my coffee and remind myself that this peace isn't a coincidence. It's the reward of every no I said when the world demanded yes. Chloe and I haven't spoken since the day of the tour. She ended up having a wedding of sorts. Brittany managed to secure a last-minute slot at a countryside vineyard that was more boho chic than glam. Word got back to me that it rained, that the generator failed during the reception, that the harpist canceled, and that Cameron's family was less than thrilled. From what I've gathered, Chloe never quite recovered from the venue debacle, not publicly at least. The Whitmores insisted on a prenup. Cameron agreed. Chloe did not. They separated 4 months after the wedding. Now she's finding herself again, as her bio says, teaching yoga in Arizona, running an online shop called Chakralux, and hosting weekly manifestation circles. She posts quotes about boundaries and self-love now. Part of me wonders if she ever realized that real boundaries aren't Instagram captions. And as for our parents, Sharon has calmed down. She still plays favorites, but she's become less obvious about it. She even apologized once. Well, her version of it. "You know, Madison," she said over brunch last month, "I've always admired your independence. I suppose I just didn't say it enough." Progress. Greg's a different story. Since our porch talk, he's become oddly supportive. Shares articles about female entrepreneurship, brags about me at his poker nights. He even started referring to Rose Hill as my daughter's estate, like it's a badge of honor. Small wins, but the biggest shift is internal. I used to believe that love from family meant sacrifice, that to belong I had to bend, shrink, give in. Not anymore. The love I have for myself now, it's not conditional. It's not based on being useful or agreeable. It's built, like my house, brick by brick. With care, with effort, with an understanding that I deserve peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable. One quiet afternoon, I got an email through the Clark and Cedar Events website. Simple, polite, professional. "Hello, Madison. I'm getting married next fall, and after hearing about your venue, I can't imagine saying I do anywhere else. My brother Cameron spoke highly of you. I'd love to schedule a tour. Warmly, Sophie Whitmore." I smiled at the screen. The universe had a funny sense of timing. The tour was set for the following week. I personally approved the booking. When Sophie arrived, I greeted her in the Rose Hill garden, the hydrangeas in full bloom behind us. She was nothing like her brother. More grounded, witty, confident. The kind of woman who made decisions with clarity, not ego. As we walked the grounds, she asked questions no other client had asked, about history, about acoustics, about the best angles for lighting at dusk. And then, mid-tour, she stopped and looked at me. "My family still talks about what happened last year," she said gently. "They were impressed." I nodded, letting the compliment sit. "I was sorry to hear about the marriage," I offered neutrally. She shrugged. "We all saw it coming, just not that fast. But Cameron's doing okay. He's traveling now, reconnecting with himself, whatever that means." We both laughed. It felt good, easy. "I'm glad you reached out," I said. "We'd be honored to host your wedding." "I knew you'd say that," she smiled. "You strike me as someone who always knows when to say yes and when to say no." I walked her back to her car, watching as she disappeared down the tree-lined driveway. And as I turned back toward the estate, I felt something shift. A full-circle moment. A quiet exhale from the universe. This place, this business, this life. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Not just of brick and plaster, but of self, of power, of voice. People think revenge is loud, explosive, vengeful. But sometimes the best revenge is the absence of chaos, the steady heartbeat of peace, the knowing glance from across a ballroom, the contract clause they never bothered to read, the house no one thought was enough until it became the cornerstone of an empire. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's standing tall and letting karma do the rest.